What's up, everybody? My name is Ryan Thomas. You are all tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and as I'm about to burp, Grandstand Sports Network. I'm sitting here in studio looking at my can of Arnold Palmer, thinking, this guy is not only one of the most legendary golfers of all time, really second, in my opinion, to the Golden Bear. John Daly has a soft spot in my heart for obvious reasons. The dude was just hilarious. Tiger, obviously, was Tiger. Phil Mickelson, up there. But Arnold Palmer has a lasting legacy with a beverage that I have appreciated the moment I first bought one at a 7-Eleven when I was like 13. Arizona iced tea, half and half, light. And I'm not getting any sponsorship money by promoting this right now. But for the sake of it, 80 calories, 15 milligrams of sodium, 21 carbohydrates, but 19 grams of sugar. So there is that. But it's a solid beverage. There's really nothing, I have no complaints about it. It is as reliable as a bowl of cereal in the morning. It just is. So I always like to start the shows off with random topics like that. It's just a part of what I do. But anyway, I want to talk about something that really shocked me for a lot of reasons. It didn't really shock me, but I've been thinking about it ever since, so I guess in a way it did. During Super Bowl week, which I've always said is one of my favorite weeks, not just because of the game, not just because of the lead up to the game. You got the JT on the halftime show, who I thought was fantastic. I saw so much hate for JT on Twitter. I thought, really? I really liked his halftime show. I thought he did a good job. The guy does look a little bit older, though. I hate to mention that, but does look a little bit older than what he used to. But aren't we all getting older? So, whatever. If he was 60 years old, he'd still dance better than I ever could. So, whatever. But Brett Favre was on a CNN show with Bennet Omalu, who, if those of you, that don't really follow the sport of football as closely as I do, Bennet Omalu, Dr. Omalu, is the man that discovered CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I'm going to admit, I probably just botched it, just probably pronouncing it just now. But Bennet Omalu's life and legacy as a doctor was pretty much documented in the Will Smith movie Concussion. And CTE is a disease that has been found in 9 out of 10 former football players. Dating back, guys that played in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So across almost every decade of the National Football League, there are players that are still alive that have CTE, or players that have died that were diagnosed with CTE. There are players that are alive that believe that they do have it, and the only way to really test whether someone has it or not is when they pass. The brain is studied, and that is how Bennet Omalu discovered the disease. He discovered it based on the fact that Pittsburgh Steelers center Mike Webster, longtime center Mike Webster, Hall of Famer Mike Webster, probably had 70,000 blows to his head from the moment he was a child to the moment he took his final snap, pun intended, as a NFL player. Over his 18-year career, probably 70,000 concussive blows to his head. What began to happen to Mike was that he began to deteriorate. He began to have random acts of rage and didn't know where he was, didn't remember certain things, certain places, certain people. Mike became a shell of himself. And Mike eventually passed. And Mike Webster was the first, and unfortunately he wasn't the last. There's been players along the way, guys like Junior Seau, guys like Dave Dearson, that were great all-time great players that could not take the emotional issues that they were having due to the fact that they had these, have this disease, I should say. And Brett Favre is in this interview, and they're asking him about CTE. They're asking him about, have you experienced anything? They're asking him about his career. And while I'm watching the interview, I think to myself, I remember watching Brett Favre. I watched Brett Favre's, practically Brett Favre's entire career. I remember watching Brett Favre when I was 4 or 5 years old at my house on Pennsylvania Avenue. And those that, live in my city or from the same hometown that listen to this show, they know exactly where that is. My basement had a flat screen TV, and me and my dad would watch the football games down there. And Brett Favre was the dude. He was the face of the National Football League. He was everything that embodied football in that Green Bay Packers number 4 uniform. And he did things that, he was Superman out there. And for Brett Favre to play as long as he did, to quote-unquote retire in 2007, and then come back, I remember his retirement press conference. He said something along the lines of, I'm officially retiring from football today. I'm going to miss... He made some sort of statement where it wasn't a close-ended sentence. It was an open-ended sentence. And I honestly thought, maybe we'll see him again. Maybe he'll take a year off and come back, or maybe he'll come back at some point. Just remember thinking that. And I talked to a good buddy of mine at the time and said the same thing. I said, I don't think he's done. And it proved to be right, that my feelings were right, that Brett was going to come back. He was going to continue to play. He played that season for the Jets. And then he went to Minnesota. Had that fantastic year for the Minnesota Vikings, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. One of the funnest years I've had watching football. And it was just so much fun watching him play. There was primetime drama versus the Packers, the whole Aaron Rodgers situation, and it was great. It was like a soap opera. Seeing this guy with the silver hair just slinging the ball, playing balls to the wall, was fantastic. And it's sad that a guy like Brett Favre just really had a tough time quitting. And people can say, well, he was so hungry for fame. And no, I don't think that was the case. The case is, and always will be, that Brett Favre just loved to play the game. And he still felt like he had something left, and obviously he was right. That last season, or the first season with the Vikings, was fantastic. He was one game away from going to the Super Bowl versus the Colts, and the bounty was placed on him from the Saints, and that was that. That season ended, and another one began. And when the second season with the Vikings started, I remember thinking, I really hope Brett realizes that that's probably the best season that he'll ever end up having. It's not going to get much better from here, Brett, and it didn't. And I don't know if it was Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, but there was a obviously accident at the Minnesota Vikings stadium at the time. The dome caved in. They had to play on the University of Minnesota field. It was minus 20 wind chill. It was, the terrible weather, cold. The ground was hard. Brett was wearing the purple long sleeves. They were wearing the old Vikings jerseys. Playing against the Chicago Bears, you can see the breath on every player. And, you can see every player take a deep breath, breathing, sucking air and breathing out and seeing the breath, do the cold. And I'm thinking, man, if he takes one hit on that ground, it's going to hurt. My buddy Eric, who has been on the podcast a few times, he's at my house. And my buddy Pat was over. And we were watching the game. My buddy's Act 2 was over. And they remember he got hit. I want to say it was by Lance Briggs. It might have been by Brian Urlacher. And I thought Brett Favre was dead. I really did. I thought he was dead. I stood up out of my chair and thought, holy crap, he is not moving at all. And Brett Favre, as I'm thinking this while watching the interview, Brett Favre starts to talk about this particular play. I thought, holy crap, he's actually talking about the play that I'm thinking about. Just as I was thinking about it, Brett Favre started talking about it. And Brett Favre says, that was the last play in my career, which it was, and I was out cold, which he was, and I was snoring, which obviously I couldn't tell that from the broadcast. I was watching it on TV. So Brett alludes to the fact that he was snoring, that he, was out. He wakes up to the sound of himself snoring and says to the trainer, was I snoring? And he said, yeah, you were out. You suffered a concussion. And Brett Favre said right there, the writing was on the wall for me to stop playing. So Brett Favre has done a lot of things to be an ambassador for football. He's done a lot of things in his playing days to be the face of the NFL. He's done a lot of things post-playing to be one of the main faces of the NFL. The commercials, the fact that he got in the Packers Hall of Fame, the retirement of his number 4, and then obviously making the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a first ballot Hall of Famer, as he should, one of the best ever, one of the best of all time. He's in my top 5. If you go back to my Thomas Take library, he's in it. He's in my top 5 quarterbacks. He's got to be. I believe he's actually number 4, oddly enough. So, all in all, for a guy like Brett Favre to say the safest way to fix football, don't play. That resonated with me. That resonated with me on so many levels, because here's a guy that I looked up to, as a fan, pretending I'm him in my backyard, playing with a football with his signature on it. Obviously a fake signature. The footballs you buy from Walmart back in the day. I'd sling that thing. I had a Packers Nerf football that had his quote unquote insignia on it. And I thought to myself, this is like one of my childhood heroes, telling me and everyone else to not allow their kids to play. And if they're gonna play, don't let them play when they're kids. Let them make their own decisions. And if they're gonna play, let them play when they're in high school, when their bodies are somewhat fully developed. And I really thought, if Brett Favre, the NFL Iron Man, is saying this, we should all listen. We really should listen. We, the fans, should listen. The commissioner should listen. The coaches should listen. There really needs to be something done about this. I mean, it sounds so plain and vague, but when you have former players coming out and saying that this is a real problem, we should listen. It's just that simple. Because if we don't, the players that are current players now will become what the former players are about to become. Brett Favre has to wake up every morning and realize that his 18-year NFL playing career will be his lasting legacy in life. Obviously, he's a father, he's a husband, and a great dad. I'm sure his family loves him, his wife loves him, and everything. But his best years as an individual, in terms of his quality of life, were those 18 years he was in the NFL. And the years prior to that where he was playing in college football at Southern Mississippi, I believe. So he looks into the future and says, it's only going to get worse from here. And because of that, we, the fans, owe it to those players to listen. I'm Ryan Thomas. You just tuned into the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on Grandstand Sports Network Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Take care, everybody.